Imagine waking up one morning and feeling something completely different. It's not anger, it's not sadness. It's something far more disturbing. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. Not physically, but internally. As if for years you had been living someone else's life, and now suddenly, your true essence is screaming to break free. This terrifying moment happens to millions of people around the world. And today you're going to discover why this happens, what triggers this radical transformation, and most importantly, what comes after this choice that can change everything. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists in history, dedicated years to studying a specific phenomenon he called the crisis of choosing oneself. And what he discovered will leave you speechless. Let's start with a brutal truth. There are people in this world who spend entire decades living as emotional slaves to other human beings. They don't consciously realize it, but all their vital energy is drained into meeting other people's needs, solving problems that aren't theirs, carrying emotional burdens they should have never carried. These people develop an almost supernatural ability to feel the emotions of others. They walk into a room and immediately sense if someone is sad, anxious, or angry. Like human antennas, they absorb everything around them. And here lies the first mystery we're going to unravel throughout this conversation. Why are some people born with this extreme sensitivity while others seem emotionally shielded? The most impressive thing is that these highly sensitive people develop extraordinary auxiliary skills. They become experts at calming conflicts, at finding the right words to comfort someone, at sacrificing their own plans to help those in need. They are the eternal advisors, the shoulders to cry on, the ones who are always available. But there's a terrible price behind this emotional superpower. While these people obsessively dedicate themselves to others, something sinister happens inside. They begin to abandon themselves completely. Their own dreams take the back seat. Their needs are constantly ignored. Their boundaries are trampled on again and again. And here emerges something Jung called the shadow, a powerful psychological force that forms when we repress fundamental aspects of our personality. Every time you swallow your legitimate anger, every time you accept being disrespected, every time you put others' needs ahead of your own basic needs, this shadow grows. For years, sometimes decades, this dynamic continues. The empathic person keeps draining themselves, erasing themselves, losing pieces of their identity. They become specialists at living through others, but completely forget how to live for themselves. But then something extraordinary happens. There is a moment, a turning point that Jung identified in his studies, where the unconscious of this empathic person simply can't take it anymore. It's as if an emotional bomb that has been ticking for years finally explodes. This moment can be triggered by various events. Sometimes it's a betrayal by someone very close. Sometimes it's complete physical and mental exhaustion. Sometimes it's simply the sudden realization that life is passing by and you don't even know who you truly are. And here is the second mystery we're going to solve. Why does this transformation happen so suddenly and radically? Why isn't it a gradual process, but instead a change that seems to happen overnight? When this crisis erupts, the person finds themselves facing a choice that will define the rest of their existence. It's a brutal psychological crossroads. Continue living as an emotional slave to others or finally reclaim your own life. Most people have no idea that this choice even exists. They live on autopilot, reacting to others, being shaped by external expectations. But when you finally realize that you have this choice, when you finally see that you can say no, that you can have boundaries, that you can live for yourself, that's when one of the most intense journeys a human being can experience begins. If you're recognizing patterns in your own life as you listen to this, if something here is making sense in a way that scares you a little, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what comes next will show you exactly how this transformation happens and why it can be both liberating and terrifying. The first thing that happens when someone finally chooses themselves is a psychological metamorphosis so intense that it feels like science fiction. In a matter of days, sometimes hours, needs that had been buried for decades begin to emerge with overwhelming force. It's as if an emotional dam had burst. Desires that were repressed for years begin to pulse with intensity. The person suddenly knows exactly what they no longer want to tolerate. Boundaries that never existed start forming naturally, almost instinctively. Jung observed that this process of metamorphosis follows specific patterns. First comes the brutal clarity about relationships. The empathic person, who once accepted any behavior from others, can now see with surgical precision when they are being manipulated, used, or disrespected. Second, A legitimate anger emerges that had been suffocated for years. It's not destructive anger, but rather a powerful vital force that finally says enough. It's the healthy anger of someone who realizes they were exploited and decides it will never happen again. Third, an urgent need for authenticity arises. The person can no longer pretend, can no longer play roles that aren't theirs. It's as if a mask they wore their entire life had shattered, and there's no way to put it back together. But here's where the real problems begin. Because this transformation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in the middle of relationships, families, and workplaces that were built upon the old version of the empathic person. And here's something shocking that Jung discovered. Most of the people around the empath never truly loved them. They loved what the empath did for them. They loved the constant availability, the infinite tolerance, the ability to solve their problems without ever asking for anything in return. When the empath begins to change, when they start setting boundaries, something disturbing is revealed. Relationships that seemed solid begin to crack. People who once called themselves friends start showing irritation. Family members who always supported them begin using emotional blackmail. The first reaction of others is almost always the same, to try to make the empath go back to who they were before. They use guilt, manipulation, emotional blackmail. Phrases like "you've changed," "you're being selfish," "you're not the same person anymore" begin to appear constantly. And here's the third mystery we promise to solve. Why do the people around react with such emotional violence when the empath finally chooses themselves? The answer will shock you. It's because they lost their free emotional supplier. For years, they got used to having someone who absorbed their problems, who was always available, who never demanded reciprocity. When that source dries up, they panic. The empath's transformation forces these people to confront something they've avoided their whole lives, their own emotional problems. With no one left to solve everything for them, they must grow, mature, and take responsibility for their own lives. But the empath, in the middle of this storm, faces the hardest battle of their life, paralyzing guilt. Because they were conditioned their entire life to believe their value as a human being depended on how much they sacrificed for others. When they stop sacrificing, when they start saying no, when they put their own needs first, a cruel inner voice begins to whisper, "You're being selfish. You're hurting people who love you. You're becoming a horrible person." This guilt is so intense that many people give up at this point. They go back to old patterns, back to erasing themselves, back to living for others. Because guilt feels more bearable than the loneliness and rejection that come with authenticity. Jung identified this as the most dangerous moment in the entire transformation. It's when the person can completely lose their identity, stuck between who they were and who they are becoming. It's like being suspended in the air, with no ground beneath their feet. But for those who manage to resist the external pressure and the internal guilt, something extraordinary begins to happen. The shadow that was repressed for years starts to integrate in a healthy way. The person begins to access an inner strength they never even knew existed. They discover that they can be empathic without erasing themselves. That they can help others without forgetting about themselves. That they can love deeply without becoming anyone's emotional slave. And here's the first twist in this journey. The people who truly love the empath not only accept their transformation but are relieved by it. Because they too were suffering, watching someone they love slowly destroy themselves. True relationships not only survive this transformation, but become deeper and more authentic. Because now there's a real person on the other side, not just a reflection of other people's needs. The fourth mystery we're going to unravel is perhaps the most intriguing one. How do you distinguish between those who truly love you and those who only use you? And why does this distinction only become possible after you choose yourself? The differentiation between true love and emotional exploitation only becomes crystal clear after you finally set boundaries. It's like a trial by fire that reveals the real nature of every relationship in your life. Those who truly love you will show curiosity about your transformation. They will ask how you are feeling, they will respect your new boundaries, even if they don't fully understand them at first. They may even feel a little lost in the beginning, but they will adapt because what matters to them is your well-being. But those who only used you will do exactly the opposite. They will try to convince you that you are wrong. They will use your insecurities against you. They will bring up memories of when you helped them, as if that created an eternal emotional debt. Jung observed something disturbing in these exploitative relationships. They follow an almost identical pattern. First comes denial, "You're not well, this is just a phase." Then comes bargaining, "If you go back to the way you were, I promise I'll change too. Then comes anger, you're being ungrateful, after everything I did for you. And finally, when nothing works, comes complete abandonment. That abandonment, as painful as it is actually a gift. Because it finally reveals who those people really were. For years you may have believed they cared about you, when in reality they only cared about what you did for them. The pain of this revelation is overwhelming. It's like discovering that half your life was built on false relationships. That people you considered family or close friends never saw you as a complete human being, but only as a function to be performed. But here something extraordinary happens in the healing process. As these toxic relationships dissolve, an immense emotional space opens up in the empath's life. And in that space, for the first time in decades, they can hear their own voice. And their own voice has incredible things to say. Dreams that were buried begin to resurface. Talents that were neglected begin to flourish. A creativity that was stifled for years explodes with surprising force. Jung identified that this phase of transformation produces extraordinary creative energy. It's as if all the energy that was once wasted on one-sided relationships is now available for the person's own growth and achievements. But the true climax of this journey comes when the person finally understands a revolutionary truth. They can be empathic and strong at the same time. They can help others and value themselves at the same time. They can be generous without being a victim. This integration creates something Jung called the authentic empath, someone who retains their natural sensitivity but now has the discernment to know when, how, and with whom to use that sensitivity. And here is the second twist in this transformation. When you stop trying to save everyone, the people around you begin to grow as well. Because you force them to develop their own capacities to deal with problems, to regulate their emotions, to take responsibility for their lives. It's like being a parent who finally stops doing their child's homework. At first, the child gets upset, tries to manipulate, throws tantrums. But eventually they learn to do their own homework and become more competent and confident. The relationships that survive this transformation become extraordinarily deep. Because now there are two real people interacting, not one real person taking care of an infantilized one. But there is a danger in this phase that Jung strongly warned about, the temptation to become too cold. Some people, after discovering how much they were exploited, develop excessive hardness. They shut their hearts completely, stop helping anyone, isolate themselves emotionally. This is an extreme just as harmful as the previous one. Because true healing does not lie in suppressing your empathic nature, but in channeling it consciously and selectively. The person who can navigate this phase with wisdom develops something that few people possess: conscious empathy. They can feel deeply for others without losing themselves in that feeling. They can help without sacrificing themselves. They can love without erasing themselves. And when this happens, when this integration is complete, an inner strength arises so powerful that it changes not only the person's life, but the lives of everyone around them. Because now they can offer something far more valuable than compulsive help. They can offer a living example of how to live with authenticity. But perhaps the most surprising thing is discovering that this transformation doesn't just affect personal relationships. It transforms the person's relationship with work, with money, with life purpose. It's as if they finally woke up from a dream that wasn't theirs and began living their own existence for the very first time. The complete transformation of an empath who has finally chosen themselves produces ripples that spread far beyond their personal life. Jung discovered that there is a profound collective impact when someone breaks the cycle of self-abandonment, and it will leave you speechless. First, let's solve the mystery of why some people are born with this extreme sensitivity. Jung realized that these people function as society's emotional antennas. They feel first the dysfunctions, the imbalances, the problems that have not yet fully manifested. It's as if they were the canaries in the coal mine of the emotional world. This sensitivity is not a flaw, it's an early warning system. The problem arises when the empath takes on the responsibility of fixing everything they feel, instead of simply recognizing and communicating what they are perceiving. When they finally learn the difference between feeling and being responsible, something extraordinary happens. They become a genuine healing force in the world because they can now point out problems without destroying themselves trying to solve them alone. The person who completes this transformation develops what Jung called the architecture of conscious boundaries. They know exactly where their responsibility ends and others begins. They know when to help and when to allow people to face the consequences of their own choices. But perhaps the most impressive thing is how this new version of the empath affects future relationships. They attract completely different people. Because now they emit an energy of self-respect that works as a natural filter. Emotionally immature people simply can no longer get close to them. The new relationships that form are based on genuine reciprocity. There is real exchange, mutual support, and shared growth. It's as if they have learned to speak an entirely new emotional language, the language of mature love. And here's something that will surprise you: these transformed people often become natural leaders, even if they never aspired to leadership. Because they have developed something rare, the ability to maintain compassion without losing discernment, to be strong without being cruel, to help without creating dependency. Jung observed 4 main types of people who emerge from this transformation. The first is the gradual boundary builder, someone who implements changes slowly but consistently. This person understands that sustainable transformation takes time and adjusts their life gradually. The second type is the crisis catalyst, someone who needs a dramatic event to awaken. It could be a betrayal, an illness, a significant loss. But when they awaken, the transformation is intense and complete. The third is the boundary specialist, someone who becomes exceptionally skilled at distinguishing what is their responsibility and what is not. This person develops a sharp intuition about relational dynamics and can navigate complex situations with wisdom. The fourth type, and the rarest, is the authentic integrator, someone who maintains all the original empathic qualities but now channels them through a mature psychological structure. This person becomes a living model of how it is possible to be deeply sensitive and incredibly strong at the same time. Regardless of the type, all these individuals share something in common: they force the social system around them to evolve. When an empath stops accepting immature behaviors, the people around them are forced to grow or step aside. This creates a powerful domino effect. Entire families begin to function more healthily. Work environments become more balanced. Whole communities can be transformed by one person who decided to stop erasing themselves. But perhaps the deepest lesson of this journey is this: choosing yourself is not selfish, it is the purest act of love that exists. Because you can only truly love when there is a real you to love through. The person who constantly abandons themselves is not loving. They are hiding behind acts of service because they are afraid to reveal who they really are. True love requires the courage to be authentic, vulnerable, real. And when you finally have the courage to be real, something magical happens. You inspire others to be real too. Your authenticity gives permission for others to be authentic. Your strength encourages others to find their own strength. Jung realized that these individual transformations are fundamental to the evolution of human consciousness. Each person who breaks the cycle of self-abandonment raises the emotional level of the entire collective. But there is an important warning: this journey never fully ends. There will always be test moments, situations that will try to pull you back into old patterns. The difference now is that you are aware, you have tools, you have a strong enough identity to resist. The most beautiful thing about this transformation is that it does not make you less empathic. It makes you empathic in a more powerful and sustainable way. You still feel deeply for others, but now you know that the best thing you can offer the world is to be genuinely yourself. So if you are going through this transformation, if you are facing resistance from others, if you are struggling with the guilt of finally putting yourself first, know that you are not being selfish. You are doing the bravest work a human being can do, choosing to be real. And when you choose to be real, you give the world something it desperately needs: a living example that it is possible to live with integrity, self-love, and genuine compassion at the same time. If this journey has touched something deep within you, if you recognize your own story in this transformation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because your journey of choosing yourself could be exactly the inspiration someone else needs to start their own transformation.